Good day to you wherever you are in the world, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to this Sensations English monthly webinar for teachers. We're restarting the webinars for the autumn after a break over the summer. So my name's Adam, I'm the ELT specialist at Sensations English, and today we are delighted to welcome our very own Colette Thompson, who will be speaking on handling ELT parsnips using teacher and producer expertise. Just a reminder that if you're watching this webinar live, a CPD certificate will be sent to your email 24 hours after the webinar has finished. If you're watching the recording, please make your own note of your professional development activity. The webinar will last an hour and will include time for questions at the end of Colette's talk. And there'll be opportunities to join in commenting in the chat box during the session as well. But please write your questions for Colette in the Q&A box. The Q&A button appears when you move your mouse to the bottom of the Zoom window. If someone has already written the same question, you can click the thumbs up button next to that question to move it higher up the list, rather than needing to write it again. And if you need any help during the webinar, please contact me in the chat box. Sensations English is focused on helping teachers to develop their skills, and we're delighted to be hosting regular webinars for teachers to support quality evidence-based practice. You can view all our previous webinars on the Sensations English webinars website, including our monthly webinars and a special series devoted to using video in ELT. And these recordings all come with the slides from the sessions as well. We hope that they will help you to develop your own practice and expand your use of authentic resources with your classes. Sensations English lesson resources are a great new advance in ELT content. We're delighted to offer teachers hundreds of video and news article resources, and all graded at 5 CFR levels with ready-made learning activities. They make learning with the news accessible to all learners and hassle-free for teachers. There are 3 new 5-level resources to use each week, giving you access to the most up-to-date content to use with all of your learners. Our Sensations English Teachers Edition includes logins for all your students and a digital teacher gradebook, which allows you to organize your students into classes, to monitor students, set tasks and monitor students on activity on tasks live, and to review your learners' progress over time. Just popping a link to that in the chat box if you're interested. So to start using this great resource, you can just go to the link and sign up. Now, to tell you a little bit about Colette. Colette has a passion for languages and education, and has been combining these with her skill as an award-winning producer and journalist for over 30 years. She trained at the BBC and has her own ELT and MFL production company, Footsteps Production, which celebrated its 30th anniversary last year. Colette's also the director of media here at Sensations English, and Colette likes to break the mold and has filmed language programs all over the world, including in refugee camps and rubbish dumps, bringing the real world into learning with all its grittiness. Colette, thank you once again for being here, and over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us for what I know for some of you is actually going to be half-term holidays, so hope you don't mind giving us an hour or so of your time. As Adam mentioned, I'm the Director of Media for Sensations English, and if you've used our site, you might even recognise my voice, because for the moment I get to do all the voicing for it as well. It would be really great as we go through if you could drop any ideas, thoughts into the chat box. We'll get to questions and answers at the end. Hopefully I'll be able to answer any queries. But you're the experts in teaching. That's not my field. I use Adam's skills when we're writing scripts and things. So it would be really fantastic to know how you're tackling some of these subject areas in your classrooms or with your students in different ways. A bit more about me. I'm a journalist and a producer, and I've been creating language programs for broadcasters and for publishers for over 30 years. I've got a passion for languages, and I've been really lucky to acquire several languages through my work. But the truth is, I think I was born a linguist. One of my earliest memories is lying in bed at the age of about 5, and I'd just been given a book called My First French Words. And one of the words in the book was porte, door. And I can still remember lying there thinking, who decides a door is a door or une porte is une porte? This is really strange. So that has actually still stuck with me over the years. Combined with my kind of love for languages, I've always really loved the news, but I never wanted to be a journalist in the traditional sense of the word. I loved all the films and the books and all that kind of thing, but I just really loved how it worked with language learning. I can still remember phrases that I learnt from listening to a French news program many, many years ago. And the phrase was en flagrant délit, meaning caught red-handed. And it was a story about a bank robbery. So when I was asked to be involved in Sensations English, for me, it was, yes, I can do this. This is really exciting. And I can't wait to bring that passion to everybody that I acquired from watching news in different languages and being able to experience that. But news is, for me, it's about opening a window to a much wider world. And it's about that being a much more modern world. Frequently, course books when I was learning languages, well, at that point, we probably had the same book for 10 or 15 years. But it was events that were changing, and that's before social media and different things happening, which was really exciting. And news, if we're looking at world news, allows us to be aware and teach, particularly English as a world language, whether it's spoken as a first language, a second language, or a fifth language. And I'll come back to how Sensations English does that later. But also, for me, what news is really good at doing is helping you to deal with parsnips. Perhaps some of you could drop in the chat about if you know what parsnips are and how you've had problems with them in the classroom. Parsnips. So yes, if any of you'd like to drop into the chat about parsnips and if you've used them, what you think they are, if you avoid them in the classroom, or if you think, yeah, this is a great opportunity, I can tackle these in different ways, that would be really great. But what are parsnips for those that you don't know? They're politics, alcohol, religion, sex, narcotics, isms, lots of those, pork, and sexual and gender identity. But how to include these when they're widely avoided as issues within ELT? For those of you that don't know, these are parsnips, a root vegetable that in many countries is only fed to the animals, but that we seem to particularly love in the United Kingdom. But how do we make them more palatable? We want to use them as an ingredient to create much more interesting dishes, much more tasty items. And that's whether we're cooking the actual vegetable or we're using them as a subject for discussion within the classroom. So how to include these avoided topics? Facts is the really, really big one that we need to look at. We need to reach for the objective, and we need to know and understand what our sources are. And we need to watch out for fake news, That's particularly the case with so much social media, because students may be finding different sources and come out with very one-sided opinions. So it's really important that we are checking where our sources are, if they've got a particular angle that they're coming from. We're really lucky at Sensations English that we work with one of the world's leading news agencies, and they are actually front runners in news checking and fake news checking, etc. They have whole teams around the world actually checking locally the authenticity of different reports. Then it's really, really important that not only are we checking and being objective about our facts, but that we're finding reports that are the appropriate level for our students and that they're appropriate for their abilities. At Sensations, we choose to bring in real voices because real voices are also more authentic, they're more objective about what they're getting across. And we need to be mindful of what those opinions are and how that material can be viewed and used. So let's go through our parsnips and see how we would tackle each of these. The first one is politics. Being a news site, are we going to avoid politics? No, that's probably the key thing that we need to look at. We can't avoid politics in news. So, an obvious news topic, we've got a variety of them here on the screen. Some could be regarded as being divisive or boring, but we've found people totally fascinated by these kinds of stories because they're reflecting things that are going on around them and that have an impact on them. Some of them, for this, depending on your students, Gorbachev is history. It's not part of modern life, but his death was an important event. This is a report on Russia's war in Ukraine. We were very, very careful when we decided to do this report. We were aware that many language schools have got students both from Russia and Ukraine in the same classes. And we didn't want to cause conflict within the classroom or one-sided or just two-sided debate. We wanted to bring facts into the classroom and facilitate discussion. And that's the feedback that we very, very much got from teachers, is that it was able to open up calm debate and to present them with a series of facts, not one-sided propaganda or what was happening in one place. This is a short report. At B2 level.
Russia's launched a military invasion into neighbouring Ukraine. The military action has been ordered by Russian President Vladimir Putin after weeks of manoeuvres circling Ukraine's borders. Fighting has already claimed hundreds of civilian lives, while hundreds of thousands have been forced to flee west. But with martial law declared, Ukrainian men aged between 18 and 60 are obliged to stand in defence of their land. Volunteer fighter Pavlo Starovoyt is among them.
The matter of fact, and I stuck in the city, but I'm from Kiev, and I want to do something to help my country to defend itself against Russian aggression.
Cities around the world have witnessed protests rejecting this unprovoked war on a democracy. Even people in major Russian cities have taken to the streets despite the dangers. Melissa's an economist who's joined the protests in St. Petersburg.
To start the war was a very bad decision for other people, because many of them have relatives, friends, husbands, and they will die for nothing.
We were fortunate in that that report was very early in the conflict, and we were still able to get voices from within Russia that were speaking and demonstrating. So that was a really interesting one for us to do. There are 5 levels: A2, B1, B1 plus, B2 and C1. So every single report that we do is at all 5 levels. We have sometimes rejected a report because we can write it with a degree of nuance and subtlety at a higher level, but we lose that when we write down to A2. So sometimes we have taken the decision that we will drop a report because it's important for us that we still have a level of objectivity and clarity without it becoming a very black and white issue at the same time. So that's really, really important to us. So I'm trying to be able to see your any chat comments without upsetting the slideshow, and it's being a bit strange at the moment. So sorry, I keep looking up at a funny angle.
Well, Emmanuel's just mentioned that they could identify a lot of present perfect in there suitable for grammar at lower intermediate levels. I suppose as the grammarian in the room right now, I could say that, you know, it's great to be able to see that kind of language embedded in real world usage. It's not I've finished my homework, but it's real world situations that are being explained using that language. So it's living language, really. And that's one of the great things about news. Back to you,
yeah.
Claire.
We don't work from the language out. We're working very much from the news into the language and then back out again. So it's working with our team of ELT writers, and particularly with Adam as our specialist, that we can draw out all those different points, which is what makes it really exciting for me. Okay, A is for alcohol. And yeah, we have absolutely tackled this as a subject. It's not about your favorite tipple, and in case anybody's asking, mine's probably a nice gin and tonic on a Friday night. But we've usually included alcohol as part of a different kind of story. So it's part of a wider focus. We've got a couple of clips on the screen here. Winemaking Sisters in Thailand, which I'll show you a short clip of very shortly, and Singapore's new tofu wine. They're both really interesting. They're both business stories. They are both about the challenges of production of kinds of wine. They include social and economic issues. And interestingly, they also talk about environmental innovations. The sisters in Thailand have taken over a vineyard run by their parents previously. And now, because of climate change, they find that European winemakers are coming to find out from them about how to produce good quality wine in hotter climates.
Tropical winemaking is really up and coming. A lot of people, a lot of winemakers from around the world, they want to know what we do here because the climate's changing, and so they have to adapt to warmer temperatures, higher rainfalls in their regions too.
However, climate isn't the only challenge for the sisters. They also have to follow Thailand's strict advertising rules.
For example, I can't show clearly a bottle of my wine. I can't post on social media what the wine tastes like, how or why it's good. And also there's a restriction in the form of excise tax.
During lockdown, the vineyard has lost nearly $1 million in earnings, and the sisters worry that further rules could make things more difficult.
So as you can see, there's a whole variety of issues being drawn in there. That report was actually at B1+, and so we scaffold slightly more into the short interviews with the sisters themselves. R is for religion, often regarded as a really hot potato, and one which should be avoided at all costs. But that absolutely doesn't have to be the case. Adam and I attended the Equals conference in Italy, in Venice, earlier this year, and Adam was giving a presentation on this occasion. And I was sitting next to a very experienced teacher and a writer of course materials. And when Adam went to introduce the piece that you're about to see, and we're going to play it, actually it's in its entirety because it's quite a short piece. The guy sitting next to me said, "I could never do that. I'm not allowed to touch religion. No, I couldn't do that." After he'd watched it, he said, "Yeah, absolutely, I could do that. Brilliant, fantastic. I hadn't thought about it that way." So there's always a different way at looking at a topic to see how you can include it. So I'll play you the report and again, drop in the chat how you might think about using it. Adam, here we go.
Okay.
Yogetu Agasaka is from Japan. He is a Buddhist monk. He usually helps families when someone dies. The lockdown stopped his work, so he made new Buddhist music during lockdown. Akasaka likes beatboxing. He makes music with his mouth. Now he is mixing beatboxing with Buddhist songs. Lots of people listen to his music on YouTube. He is happy about this.
I just realized that I can just spread my my stuff not only in Japan but to like in the world.
Akasaka wasn't always a Buddhist monk. He started when he was 30 years old. He hopes young people will listen to his music. He hopes they become interested in Buddhism.
So maybe if my music attracts younger people, it'll be a good opportunity for them to know about like the Buddhism.
So a very simple piece. It's not about indoctrination or the rights or wrongs of every religion. It's not creating a conflict between ideologies, but it shows a monk who's embedding his skills and knowledge within a cultural background. And that's the way we frequently approach religion. It's through festivals and celebrations and cultural events. We've covered the Hong Kong Dragon Boat Festival, the Dubai Hanukkah being celebrated for the first time in Dubai publicly. We've done Diwali, various different Indian festivals, Holi. So it's a really interesting way of doing it and looking at shared experience around festivals and events rather than differences and divisions for that. So from religion to sex, well, this is probably something that we've not covered directly. But what do we include under the sex banner, if you like? Nudity, romantic relationships. We've covered the Dior Men's Paris fashion show. We've dealt with the drug that heals a broken heart. And we recently covered Gigi Hadid and the spray-on dress. We did that as an article to avoid showing her arriving on stage naked. But a really, really interesting piece, which perhaps you wouldn't expect to come under the sex banner, was the South Africa mourning the death of the Zulu king. When there is a traditional Zulu festival, the Zulu people will come in traditional dress. And for women, that means bare breasts. So we had to do a very careful shot selection and a bit of judicious editing. And it produced some really interesting ideas. And by using, again, people's voices. Let's see what you think about this piece and how you might have used it.
Zwelithini had the longest reign of any monarch in Zulu history, serving his people for over half a century. The Zulu king's role is purely ceremonial with no executive power, but many of the country's 11 million Zulus followed Zwelithini's guidance on cultural matters. The monarch's reign was dedicated to restoring Zulu traditions, a move criticised by some but welcomed by others.
It is important to me because that is where I found my identity as a Zulu woman. This is where I've learned about my culture. It's where I also tackled my own personal issues about such as body image issues, low self-esteem. This is where I conquered all that, because when you hear nobody cares about your body size, your body shape.
So she's talking about her body image and body shape, and it's very relevant to the whole report that's happening at that time. It's not about us inventing what people say and getting fake voices to interpret it, but allowing those voices to be heard. Body image is a really, really big issue for lots of people at the moment. It comes up in very strange ways on social media and not always in a positive way. So it was very unexpected to find this particular interview within a piece about the death of the Zulu king. But I think it shows how the different parsnips in a way can be woven through the different reports and why things can come up in that kind of unexpected way. This report was at C1. You might have noticed the report from the Buddhist monk was at A2. You can hear the difference in speed, the complication of the language. We will work together as a team to work out how to scaffold the language up or down, depending on what is required. And again, using world news, we're able to expose the learner to a whole variety of accents. So it's not just my British English that they're going to hear, but they will hear this Zulu woman, they will hear the Thai women producing their wine, they will hear the Japanese Buddhist monk. It's a whole variety of voices, and they should have the opportunity to hear English spoken in a way perhaps that they're going to hear it around them and that will be more familiar to them, or from neighbouring countries or from tourists visiting. It's giving a richness to everything that we're trying to present. So N is for narcotics, probably another one that we haven't tackled directly, but one that we certainly would tackle, not in a way of being sensationalist or glamorizing drug taking. We're certainly going to avoid preaching about it, but we're not avoiding it on principle. It's come up as an incidental factor again in reports that we've done. We ran a report about the Colombian drug lord, Pablo Escobar, and his hippos, which had escaped into the countryside and caused chaos. So it's about whether or not you should be keeping a zoo and where the animals can't be looked after, things like that. In a strange way, it's almost, some of the issues raised are almost a parallel of talking about drug taking and the issue of drugs. And we certainly wouldn't shy away from it if we were talking about smugglers being arrested or the changes in law around drugs in different countries. We would certainly look at covering that. I don't know if anybody's here from Canada or from Portugal, where you've both recently had changes in the whole approach to drug possession. Have you tackled that as a subject with your learners? How have you gone about it? It'd be really interesting for us to know, so that we could look at how we include that in the future, how we would go about a report. Is there a kind of report that you would like to see us do that we should look for? and maybe do an article or a video about. So we could be tackling it as an article. If we can't tackle it directly as a video because it doesn't show the right things, we could be tackling it as an article. I mentioned the hippos from Pablo Escobar. We have a picture of them here. It's about the environmental damage, the irresponsibility, and invasive species in the wrong place, strategies for dealing with it, as I say, all kind of metaphors in a way for the drug industry itself. Isms. There are lots of isms, and we certainly wouldn't be avoiding most of them, but at no point are we going to be racist, disablist, or anything else that did not promote inclusivity. We've reported on the Black Lives Matter demonstrations, amputee football in Indonesia, Hazara women in Pakistan learning martial arts for self-defense, which is a really stunning report. New rules around sign language, schools in Indonesia using sign language. Whole schools started to help students learn. And a really interesting report, which I'll show you a short piece of, about Shanghai wheelchair users wanting change.
Zhao Hongcheng vlogs about disabled people's rights and campaigns for equality. Zhao has relied on a wheelchair since contracting polio during childhood. Although educated to master's level herself, Zhao argues that many people with disabilities are denied educational opportunities.
Wheelchair users still face difficulties getting into education and employment. That's why they are not being seen very often. But that doesn't mean there are not many of them. The number of wheelchair users is actually very high.
It's about bringing personal stories in, which I think makes it very, very engaging. You'll be really clear on what your target audience is and how to go about presenting challenging material to them. What we aim to give you is a real base on which students can develop higher order thinking skills through issues that they care about and things that are happening now. But we also want to reflect on screen who they are. And because you cannot be what you can't see. So it's really important that everybody is included. Moving on to pork. Pork, this is another subject which up to now we haven't tackled actually directly, but pigs and pork have come into our reports in slightly unusual ways. We featured the first human heart transplant with a pig's heart earlier this year. I would say, do look away now if you don't like blood or would rather not see the heart. This is in the operating theatre and does reveal that, and I'll come back to you when we've finished.
Doctors at the University of Maryland Medical School have saved a man's life by using the heart of a pig. This is great news for medicine. There is a lack of organs for people who need them. People hope pig organs will be the solution. Mohammed Mohoidin is a director at the medical school. He's excited about the results.
We are all very excited to see this big heart beating in this human. This big heart has performed so far very well, even beyond our expectations. We have not seen any signs of rejection.
You can look back now if you've looked away. So a very a very different kind of report that includes the mention of pigs, but it's a report that could raise all sorts of discussions and facilitate all sorts of discussions in the classroom, not necessarily about the use of a pig's heart, but about furthering science, the use of any animals in science, or for some people that would even be about whether or not transplants should be performed. News is about facts. This is an event that happened. It may be a story that a learner's already picked up on social media, as I've mentioned before. They may have really strong opinions about it, but you have a facility here to discuss and look at different sides. We've got the doctors speaking. Interestingly, I think the doctor that you've just heard is actually Muslim. So there's really interesting room for discussion around all of that. S, the final S, it's a new letter that's been added to the parsnips. We've gone from one parsnip with a small s to parsnip with a capital S at the end, which is sexual and gender identities. Again, it's very much not part of sex. It really is to do with identities, people's identities. We have included this in different ways. We've included it using usualization and disruption approaches. So, for example, we have, as a disruption approach, we covered the Pope backing LGBT civil unions. And that's probably the main one where we've done it as a very we've used a disruption approach. But we would certainly tackle it again if the right report came up, and we would certainly do it as a video. However, we have used the usualization approach. We just use it across the board for pretty much everything that we do. So we had a piece about Czech women and wanting equality in the way they could use their surnames, that actually introduces transgender issues as well as male-female equality issues. This is a short piece from a piece about lockdown weddings. Gibraltar was one of the places that remained open for weddings during COVID when so many had to be cancelled.
Sarah Ann lives in Spain.
Well, both myself and my partner were from England and Ireland. So we didn't want to choose either of them countries.
Fabian Picado, Gibraltar's chief minister, is delighted that Gibraltar is helping bring lovers together.
Whether you're a James Bond or a Beatle or a person who is needing to ensure that they can make that bond of love official and legal, Gibraltar's the place for you.
The Beatles, by the way, were one of the Beatles, the pop group, had got married there many years ago, and we're not talking about insects getting married. This is the piece I referred to about the Czech Republic gendered surnames, and we had an interesting article about this, again, at 5 levels. So, as you can tell, I'm still very passionate about news, using the richness of language and whatever that language happens to be, to tell a story which opens up the world. And I love how we can be very inclusive with that. Equality, diversity, and inclusion is simply part of our lifeblood. Last year, Sensations English was lucky enough to win 2 Elton commendations from the British Council, one for our work around equality, diversity and inclusion, and the other one for our action on climate change, which is a really good lead-in to the British Council requirements on protected characteristics, which are gender, race, ethnicity, culture, age, disability, religion or belief, and sexual and gender identity, which you can see segue very, very neatly into the parsnips. The other things that they have added on are socioeconomic background, urban and rural realities, and linguistic diversity, all of which are covered amazingly by news, and particularly with linguistic diversity, when we're able to feature English being used in different ways from around the world, whether it's as a first language or as an acquired language later on. As I said at the beginning, whether it's a first, second, or fifth language or more. But if you're going to use news, what do you have to be aware of as a teacher? You need to be super aware of your news source. What is, if you're picking something up from a newspaper, and you may not be aware of what the political affiliation or background of that newspaper is, because it's maybe not one that you find readily in your country, is what is the agenda? How objective is that piece? Can you bring facts? Can you bring an objectivity in it? How does the context of the story support the content that's actually in it? And can you see your learners within that report? Are they represented in some way? As I think I mentioned earlier, you can't be what you can't see. So can they see themselves within that? What ways can you introduce that report which will help promote higher order thinking? Can you use it in different ways? When we first set up Sensations English, we imagined it very much for 16-year-olds plus. And we've been very, very surprised by it being used with 11-year-olds even, and teachers reporting back to us that it provoked a level of higher order thinking that they didn't even know that their class or their students had. So if you set up a piece correctly, it really will take on a life of its own in certain ways. And it's finding level appropriate material to cover those topics and to cover them with your students, because they might, you will know your students the best. You will know which of the reports, what style of report, what kind of report would be best for them. And you can pick those out and choose them. And I'd be really interested to know, of all the clips that you've seen today, which ones that you might pick out to use with your students or try with them, or would you look for something similar to one of them but slightly different? I'd be really interested to know. So really happy to ask any questions. And I'd still like to know, who decided a door was a door or un pot was un pot? I've never had an answer to the question.
Thank you very much, Colette. That was wonderful. Thank you very much. We've got a few questions from the audience already, and feel free to type some more into the Q&A box if you have them. First question is, can you say a bit more about the context supporting the content and maybe give an example of that, perhaps?
Oof, Adam, would you say the protests in Iran piece was a good one?
I've got lots of ideas, but I'm not sure.
Throw something in and I'll follow it up because my brain's gone slightly blank.
Okay, so in general terms, I'd say that the context is the environment, the space in which you can then explore these issues more safely. Because if you go in with a topic, a hot potato, then that's going to bring in everybody's particular context that they see that issue in. rather than framing it within a pre-managed space. So, for example, if you're dealing with a difficult issue like religion, for example, then looking at it in terms of a particular event that draws out particular characteristics, which then you can see parallels with in other lived experience, including your own, that then takes a lot of the fire out of the issue and makes it much more something that people can come together about and reflect on. So that's one of the ways in which the context really supports any parsnips content that's there. But Colette, you were going to say something.
For me, it always comes back to how they tie it. Always comes back to the objectivity, and we recently ran a piece about the Iran protests, and we took those. We looked at that globally. Obviously, there is a lot of footage coming out on social media. We only used footage that had been verified, but we tried to look at the situation in which that was happening and why it was happening now. And we looked at the fact that there were protests in New York and women across the world joining in a protest. So I don't know if that answers the question as well. There are different ways of looking at this.
Yeah, I think it's certainly a topic where, I mean, with that one, I think everybody has probably got an opinion on Iran and an opinion on the kind of the rules on dress which are enforced there, and then you've got various different opinions on that. But when you dig down into the question marks about people's rights and people's treatment, then it takes it away from what might be someone's deeply held beliefs and puts it in the situation of people in a battle with authority, for example. So yeah, you really do turn it around there. There's another question which is someone saying they're interested to know how other teachers are actually using the materials. Do you suggest things to look out for or wait till they've seen an item?
We have within the site, we actually have a teacher zone where we provide some lesson plans and ideas of how you might go about using the material. Some of them are generic and some of them are very specific to reports that we're doing. We, for COP26 last year, ran 2 weeks of special reports around that. I see there's another question from Joan about how often is new content released. We actually release new content 3 times a week, on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. That's 1 article and 2 videos at 5 levels. So we, during COP26, ran 6 reports around the environment, but we also chose other reports that we've done in the past that as a teacher you might choose to run a whole series around the environment and do different aspects of that: sustainability, the environment, climate change, and we incorporated that into the lesson plan for you. So you've got all the material there. There are also 13 currently interactive activities with exercises, which include comprehension and grammar and sentence structure, etc., activities which are on the site, which students can use. Again, they're all at 5 levels. So you can draw out the language in different ways, and that work's already been done for you.
And yeah, just to say, if you go onto the Sensations English website, I'll put the link in there. You can see the COP26 webinar and the Padlet, which contains all of the specific resources that were made for that to guide people on using it. Another question, Emmanuel asks, does your website include any kind of suggested debating questions or some sort of worksheets to work along with your videos? Kind of partly covered already, but anything else to say on that, Colette?
Brilliant idea. That would be, I think, Adam, we should take the idea of debating issues on board to put in the teacher zone. I think that'd be a really great idea.
Absolutely. There are already some questions for students to answer, which are written generically enough that you can apply them to almost any report. And that's something that I've done as a CELTA trainer. I've kind of worked out how you could phrase some questions to bring out those kinds of critical discussions. But yes, it's certainly something that then as you can take inspiration from, but yeah, certainly something that we'd like to include. This is a resource which is growing and changing all the time because it's digital, so it can, and that's one of the things we'd like to include in future, but we'll take that on board definitely. And Eleonora asks, is every video available at every level?
Yep, absolutely. And longer term, we hope to expand our range even more, but for the moment it's 5 levels, and that keeps us well occupied throughout the week, particularly as we're doing all the comprehension questions. They're all human created, they're not algorithm driven. So with the fast turnaround, it's quite a challenge to get everything done. Linked to the idea of debating questions and using the material in different ways, one of the things that we would encourage is with further writing activities, or rather than role plays of arriving at a hotel and doing whatever, is people can be reporters, students can be reporters. If it's a subject area that really fascinates them or they have strong opinions about, they could deliver a report about this. They could do it as a television journalist and be on film on their cameras, or they could do it just as an audio report, or they could do it as a written report. It could be microblogging. It could be done in 120 characters for Twitter. It could be done as a few sentences around an image for Instagram. It could be done as a short TikTok piece. We do have TikTok channels and things, and some of you might have seen me doing odd little reports around the place when something strikes me. I think we have a herd of elephants that I discovered crossing the Mall in front of Buckingham Palace one day, which just made me question, why did the elephant cross the road? We've had Extinction Rebellion in Trafalgar Square, and I've gone and covered that, or outside Buckingham Palace when Prince Philip or the Queen has died. So it would be really exciting for students to go out and cover something themselves, and it doesn't have to be something massive. It doesn't have to be the 2.5 minutes or so that we've got as a report here. It could be 30 seconds for Twitter, or a really short reel for Instagram, and something that they can have ownership for and develop a style and a voice for. So you can use it in different ways for listening for the rest of the class, or speaking practice, or writing practice. There's lots of different ways that you can take those themes, and as they're things that are happening now very often. So it's not going to be that they're sisters making wine in Thailand, but it could be that, what's a product that would be difficult to grow here or make here, or what are you really interested in? Or it doesn't matter whether people are living in an urban environment or a rural environment. There are different things that they can talk about.
Thank you. I think that's pretty much all we're going to have time for, Colette. If I can just share my screen very quickly and let people know, just a couple of things. But first of all, thank you, Colette, so much for that talk. The other things are just a reminder that you can catch up on any of the webinars we've already done, which you might have missed, on sensationsenglishwebinars.co.uk, and you can share all of that information with other people by social media. There's links to the webinars and also the teachers edition of Sensations English, which you can get more information of and sign up for online. And don't forget to follow us on social media so that you can catch the latest information from and the latest reports that come out from Sensations English as well. Just remains for me to say thank you again very much for that wonderful talk, Colette. Thank you everyone who's here for taking the time to be here today. Have a great day or night wherever you are in the world. Bye-bye.
Thank you.